All right, time for Football at 4. John McMullen at JF McMullen. Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. We know that the Patriots and the Eagles both coming off of a bye, but if they had extra time to watch each other, what would be something that they would take from that video and focus on for this week? We'll dive into that with John McMullen. We know that the Ravens ran all over the Patriots. Did they set a blueprint? And if they did, can anybody even duplicate that blueprint?
Is Lamar Jackson available?
No, not this week.
All right.
But can Carson Wentz do what Lamar Jackson does? Can you ask him to do that?
That'd be nice.
I mean, he could probably do some of the stuff if you really wanted him to.
I think he can.
Is that the best way to go about it? We get into that. Plus, what would the Patriots see about the Eagles that they would want to focus on? Doug Peterson spoke today. We'll get into all that. Football at 4. John McMullen right now on the Boardwalk on the hotline. And, John, we saw the Patriots defense have a tough time against the run on the Ravens. So is Doug Peterson going to kind of watch that film and come up with something to run the ball heavy at the Patriots?
Well, I think they want to run the ball for a number of reasons. One, Alshon Jeffery didn't practice today, so that's going to trend in a negative direction. As far as potentially being back by Sunday, Doug labeled him as day-to-day, so there's a potential he could play. But, you know, there's a real scenario that Jordan Matthews could be the number one receiver on Sunday, and he's going to have 3 practices under his belt. So that's not a good situation to be in from a wide receiver standpoint. Eagles kind of talked about it all today. Doug Peterson, Zach Ertz himself, everybody knows they're going to try to shut Zach Ertz down. That's what the Patriots do. Force, shut down your best player, attempt to shut down, force other guys to beat you. Everybody thinks that's what's going to happen. That's what the Lions did with Matt Patricia. It's probably what's going to happen, although you never know with Bill Belichick. But Doug also talked to the Boston media today, and they asked about the Ravens game. And I put this on Twitter so people can check it out at JF McMullen. Lamar Jackson is special. You can't run what they run. They're unique. They're the only team in the NFL that runs that offense. And there's a reason, because you can't duplicate that. It's not to say Carson Wentz doesn't have his own strengths. And in a lot of ways, he's a much stronger quarterback than Lamar Jackson, but they can't run that offense.
Yeah, and you brought up something there that might have caught people's ears, is Jordan Matthews might be the number one wide receiver this week. What is going on with Alshon Jeffery?
Well, he hurt his ankle, remember, in the fourth quarter against the Bears. He had that tough game where he dropped 3 passes. Then he finally caught one in the fourth quarter to convert a big situation, big third down to get a first down, but he injured his ankle, had to leave that game. Eagles had to finish that game without him. So the bye week came at a really good time from his perspective. But, hey, if it's an ankle injury, if it's a high ankle injury, it could be multiple weeks. Good news, as I said, in Doug Peterson lexicon, day to day, means there's a chance, whereas week to week means there isn't a chance.
Yeah, and he did not practice today, which typically is an interesting storyline moving forward here. But Jason Peters, what's the deal with him?
Jason was back at practice, so that's a positive. Obviously, he was moving around pretty well in the limited portion we get to watch practice. The team admitted today, Jeff Stoutland kind of let the cat out of the bag on Monday that he had surgery. Doug had to admit he did have arthroscopic surgery on his knee. So he's getting close. The fact that he's out there on Wednesday means there's a chance he's going to be back, and he's going to be the starting left tackle. Anybody who thinks that isn't the case, Doug said it, Jeff Stoutland said it. He's going to be back, and he should be back. He was playing very well before he got injured. There's always the concern that he gets banged up and can't finish games, and that's all true and that's all understandable. But when he's out there, he's still their best left tackle.
John, talk about the chess match between the coaches and the coaching staffs, really, because, Doug Peterson says, and you wrote this on the 97.3 ESPN website today with the title, Eagles believe Ertz will draw Belichick's attention. Is there any smoke and mirrors there? Like, does Belichick keep up with this stuff and say, okay, let's disguise some things and go a different route, or it's not that in-depth?
No, well, I think you got to be realistic. I just, talked about the issues the Eagles are having at receiver. So that plays into it as well. Maybe if you had Alshon Jeffery healthy at 100%, he could play some different games and go in different directions. So I think the question is more of how do they try to do it? That's one thing about Bill Belichick's DNA. We always talk about how he can morph from week to week, never mind year to year. But there is a certain part of his DNA that says take away the best player and force lesser players to beat you. That's always been his mentality. It continues to be his mentality. It's just how he does it. I quoted Roddy Piper today. Mike Gill will like that. Famous saying from Roddy is just when you think you have all the answers, I change the questions. So that's kind of what Bill Belichick does. You think you know, but he might go about it in a different direction. He's got a lockdown corner, one of the best 3 or 4 cornerbacks in football, and Stephon Gilmore. So if he wants to put him on Zach Ertz, he can probably shut Zach Ertz down, or he can bracket Zach Ertz, double team him, and tell Gilmore to lock down the other side of the field. So there's a lot of different ways you can go about it.
We started this segment, John, talking about Lamar Jackson and the Ravens' success against the Patriots, specifically on the ground. But I've mentioned this a few times already on today's show, and the Patriots have 19 interceptions, a ball-hawking defense. Look at the schedule and the opponents, but that's besides the point. And only 3 passing.
More importantly, the quarterbacks that those teams have.
Exactly. They're basically handing it to them. But regardless, the stats are there. How much of a challenge is this going to be for Carson in the air, throwing the ball?
Well, it is going to be a challenge for the Eagles offense as a whole because you have to make sure you do not make mistakes because you kind of know the Patriots aren't going to make a ton of mistakes from the offensive side. So you talk about the turnovers. They're plus 17 in turnovers, plus 17. Now, you can talk about the opponents all you want, and that's fine. But I brought this up with the Eagles, and people said, whatever, I think they gave up 9 yards in the first half to Mitchell Trubisky. And people say, well, that's Mitchell Trubisky. Well, anybody else done that? They played this week, and Mitchell Trubisky was awful in the first half, but they still had, I think, 110 yards. 9 yards is pretty stinking impressive against any NFL team. Plus 17, the point I'm getting at, is pretty stinking impressive no matter who you're playing. That's difficult to do. So they have ball hawks. I just mentioned Gilmore. You can talk about the McCourties. Hightower is a player the Eagles are very concerned with. Dante Hightower, Van Noy is having a tremendous season. They're good defensively. You look down the list, first in total defense, first in scoring defense. They're first in basically everything. And people can turn themselves into a pretzel and say they might not be as good as those statistics say they are. And maybe they aren't, but they're still really good.
Yeah, and, what was it about the game against the Ravens? They gave up 37 points in that game. And, you take a little closer look at the box score and you say, well, Ingram had 15 for 115. That's almost 8 yards a carry. You throw in Jackson, who didn't have a big per carry, but he had 16 for 61. They gave up 210 yards on the ground in that game. So the first time they played someone, it does set up some red flags of, hey, what's the weakness of this defense that had been so dominant against, lesser teams?
Well, and that's why I bring up what Doug said about Lamar Jackson and about copying. You can't copy what the Ravens did. Nobody plays that offense. Nobody's capable of playing that offense in the NFL. Nobody plays that scheme. We mentioned before, I've compared it to Navy and college football, where you can't prepare for it. You can't spend a lot of time on it because once the game's over, you got to go back to adjusting to normal NFL teams. So it's an outlier. I mean, if you're going to look at the Patriots and say, what don't they do well on defensively, and that's probably what don't they do as well, it's stopping the run versus stopping the pass. I think they're 12th in stopping the run, first in stopping the pass. But we talked about this a little bit yesterday with the 49ers. Well, the 49ers got gouged a little bit against the Seahawks. They got gouged a little bit against Arizona as well. It's what the modern NFL is. You're not going to go through 16 games and be a lockdown defense at all times. This league just does not allow that in the modern era. I wouldn't get overexcited and say they're not good, because they are good.
No, we see it a lot where, you see a team one week get gashed and you're like, they gave up a lot of yards on the ground. And then the next week, teams tighten up because they realize, all right, we didn't run the ball. We didn't stop the run very well. Now we got to put an extra guy. So that's a little cat and mouse game that goes on in the league. Let's go to this. Somebody asked today at the presser for Doug that Alshon has not been as productive. And he asked if that has to do with the injuries or other factors. And I thought he kind of, he said Dallas Goedert. So why do you think Alshon has not been as productive as he had been his first couple of years here?
Well, I think the hope is it's injuries. He hurt his calf in the Atlanta game, which was week 2, and missed the one game and came back. And he's sort of been playing through it. And it's pretty clear he doesn't have the same speed, the same explosion. And he was never a speed guy to begin with. That was never his top trait. So you take another step off and you start to have concerns. And now he hurts the ankle as well. So I think the Eagles are hoping it is strictly injury related, because the other path is a more negative one, and that's just he's descending rather rapidly as a player. And if that's the case, they got big issues.
Enough so, John, that they would sit him out this week to get him healthy for the stretch run, realizing, look, it's an AFC opponent. Next, really, I mean, if they lose this game, it's not good, but it's better than losing an NFC game.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I don't think they're going to push for him to get on the field just because the Patriots are coming in. I mean, if he's healthy, he'll go. I don't think it's one of those situations where they're saying this is a playoff-type atmosphere. If you can tough through it, we need you out there. No, I think they would rather have him as healthy as possible, and really for those final 5 games, because I think that's you hope to get one of these next 2. If you get 2, you're cruising. But those final 5 games are all it's about. And it's Aaron Rodgers territory. You got to run that table, and they got to run that table in those final 5. And things are lined up for them. 4 bad opponents, 1 good opponent, but the good opponent is at Lincoln Financial Field. So, I agree with you. They're not just going to push them on the field because it's the New England Patriots.
What about the running game, John, with everything we're talking about regarding Belichick's zeroing in potentially on Ertz? Alshon Jeffery's not himself. We all know the story with Nelson Aguilar. You mentioned Jordan Matthews may be wide receiver number 1 on Sunday. Obviously, that heightens the importance in the run game, specifically with Jordan Howard and Miles Sanders. What's Miles Sanders' role going to be, and how important is that run game for the Eagles' success?
Well, I think it's big. That's what this team almost has to become now in the second half of the season, is a team that relies on the running game and the tight ends. And that's not only this game, that's pretty much moving forward because of all the deficiencies at wide receiver. So that's just what they have to be. And the strength of this team is arguably the offensive line. So it all makes sense. And that's where I say everyone assumes Bill Belichick is going to try to take away Zach Ertz, and that's why I brought up the Roddy Piper quote. He might say, you know what, we're going to put 8 people in the box because we think the only way you can beat us is with the run game, and they might try to stop that. So it's not just assuming. I think everyone kind of defaults to you got to stop the top receiver because this is such a passing league. But the way the Eagles are morphing and developing an identity, it's the running backs and the tight ends.
And one thing is that we kind of talked about what Belichick had started to do was teams defensively would put lighter linebackers out there, so he started running at you. The Eagles linebackers are not good. It looks like, well, they're not good run-stuffing guys. Okay, I don't want to tick off the Nate Geary crowd, John.
I think there isn't a Nate Geary. Evidently, I'm the only
I know.
Geary.
But Bradham does not look like he's going to be ready to go this week again, correct? And if so, I mean, do you anticipate that Belichick says the Eagles linebackers are a little light, let's go right after them?
Yeah, it's a possibility. I mean, they've struggled running the football, which I think is a big disappointment from their perspective because they were so good at it late last season. And they kind of changed to being a run-first team. But they don't have their fullback who's on IR. They've had some offensive line changes. So they haven't been the same team running the football. And, yeah, I do think if you look at the Eagles linebackers, I think you could say you can take advantage of them. I don't think there's any question, no matter who they throw out there. It's not a talented bunch. Anytime you're on the road, it's a cold day here in South Philadelphia. It's not going to be this bad, but the weather's starting to turn a little bit. That plays into it as well. This is when seemingly the running game becomes more important in the NFL, and I think the Patriots do want to get that going, not only this game, but for the rest of the season.
Also, anything to be concerned that Jordan Howard was limited participant today?
No, Doug didn't mention anything in his press, not that he's going to volunteer any information, but that's one of those things. It's a guy who is typically, if you think about his days in Chicago, he's used to a lot of traffic, a lot of touches, but when you're a running back, you get banged up. So as you get to this point of the season, you'll have limited days. You'll even get a day off on occasion, but from all indications, the Eagles expect him to play.
John McMullen at JF McMullen. Of course, we do football at 4 every day here on the Sports Bash. And I guess before we, move ahead here, you look at the Eagles and how important this game is. We kind of mentioned it. If they lose to the Patriots 5-5, doesn't, it's not great, but it's really – they got to split these 2 home games, right? I mean, even if they lose this game, just to walk the listeners off the plank a little bit, they got to really split the 2. But even if they were to lose both of the home games and Dallas split their games, they'd still kind of be hanging around.
Oh yeah, no question. I said that's the goal, the split. If you win them both, I mean, you're celebrating. You're going to win this division essentially if you win both of these games. That's my feeling anyway. If you lose, if you're only going to win one, you'd probably prefer to beat Seattle.
Yes.
Because it's an NFC team, as you mentioned. You don't really need to beat the AFC team. So if you're only getting one, you would prefer the Seahawks. And if you do lose 2, look, at that point, everybody's going to be jumping off buildings, but it isn't going to be as disastrous as it seems because of those final 5 games. And the schedule that's the soft part of the Eagles schedule.
Yeah. A couple quick NFL notes I want to get your take on. Number 1, Colin Kaepernick will work out. Eric Reed has come out and said it feels like a PR stunt. A lot of teams planning on checking this out. So do we feel that this is a PR stunt or that there's a potential that teams have been asking the league to help facilitate something here?
No, I agree with Eric Reed. Sounds like a PR stunt. This is not the typical way workouts are done in the NFL. Colin Thompson can talk about this a lot. It's generally you get called on Monday, you come in on Tuesday to work out. I mean, if an individual team had an interest, they would have worked out. They would have done a workout. So I don't know why the NFL did it at this point, but it's a weird precedent.
Does it sound like, John, that the teams maybe collectively said, look, we don't want to be the team that brings them in individually. Can you set something up for us so that we don't look like the one team so that we can all be there?
I mean, I guess, but if you're going to sign them, you're going to have to answer the same questions.
It's like it takes one level of firestorm out.
Well, I don't know. It's interesting. Of all places, because I get, transcripts from just about every NFL team when coaches speak, and I run through them, pretty much every day and periodically when any coach speaks, and everybody's getting this question already. Are you going to have people at Colin Kaepernick's workout? So it hasn't removed that. Interestingly, Philadelphia is the only place we never got to it. There's so much going on with the Eagles. Nobody ever asked that question. I'm going to ask it on Friday when we get to speak with Doug Peterson again. But everybody's getting that question anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't think it removed anything.
It'll be interesting to see. I mean, he's going to work out in Atlanta on Friday, is it?
Saturday.
Okay. And I did see reports that the Giants were at least one of the teams that are going to be down there. I mean, I'm assuming most teams are going to at least take a peek.
Yeah, I'm assuming. I would be surprised if close, if anything, not close to all 32 teams send someone. Now, it's not going to be a meaningful person a day before games. It's not going to be coaches. It's probably just going to be scouts and lower level personnel people. But yeah, I don't know why the NFL is doing it. I've been trying to rack my brain. I can't. It's strange. It really is strange.
All right. Real quick, Jets CEO has come out and said, Adam Gase has my trust. He will be back next year. Are you buying or selling that comment?
Well, I think most Jets fans would hope he was just using that as lip service to get through the season, and you revisit it. Look, I'm pretty above board about my thoughts on Adam Gase. There aren't many coaches in this league that will throw players under the bus. That's why, yesterday Ryan asked me about Carson Walsh and asking about Matt Collins and speaking well about Matt Collins. And I explained, well, coaches aren't going to throw players under the bus except for Adam Gase. I don't know why you would want him. I always talk about the most important thing to be a coach in this league. It's not X's and O's, it's leadership. Doesn't show leadership. Doesn't show accountability. If you go back to Andy Reid, everybody hates, I got to do a better job in this town. But you know what they would hate worse? A coach that threw his players under the bus.
We'll leave you at this. We talked about this earlier. The MVP of the league, John McMullen's pick is
Russell Wilson.
Yep.
And I don't think it's particularly close. I think Lamar Jackson is a legit number 2 in that race. You can also throw Christian McCaffrey, but I don't think the team success is quite where it needs to be. I think it's Russell Wilson running away at this point.
All right. And, of course, John McMullen, Football at 4, like all guests appear to be the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. John's back tomorrow with more Football at 4. Thanks, pal.
All right. Thank you, guys.